Good morning. I'm trying to get this set up. Really, nobody's on here yet, but I hope everything goes. I'm seeing how this looks. And wow. Yeah, this is really not about motorcycle maintenance, by the way. But it's just going to be me talking about whatever comes on my mind as I pull the carburetor off this machine. And if you tuned in to find out about how to repair a motorcycle, you came to the wrong place. I'm going to stop the music because it'll drown out my voice. Good morning, family and friends. Let's see, yeah, there I am, yeah. Well, this is my 1996 Kawasaki, and yesterday I took it for a ride. I was going to go to Hot Springs, and I stopped by the Rebels Den Cycle Supply to look at an item that I was considering to purchase. And while I was there talking to Tony and Josh, showing off my bike and everything, and we talked and everything. Then I got ready to leave to head on into Hot Springs, try to start the bike, and the carburetor was flat out. Well, that means one of two things. When I cleaned the carburetor, I didn't do it right. What I suspect is what I did is I cleaned the carburetor, I cleaned out the gas tank, but I didn't clean out the fuel line. It's the only thing I can think of. So I'm going to be taking this down and taking the carburetor off and taking the fuel line off, and inspect the carburetor and make sure the fuel line is clean and everything's, the petcock's working like it's supposed to be working and everything like that. But really, this is not going to be about how to do that. I'm just going to be talking to you all why I do that. I don't know, I don't see anybody online yet with me, so I want to go ahead and get started. And I really hate this Kawasaki, by the way, in some ways. It's so hard to take this seat off. You got this little tiny bolt that's down here that you can barely get to, and only a little wrench will do it. But anyways, this is really not about repairing this bike. That's what I'm going to be doing while I'm talking. This is really going to be about me. I know a lot of you people think you might know me. A lot of you, I only know you online. A lot of you, I've known you ever since I was a child. There's a lot of you that I know from my Army days, and there's people I know from my church. A couple people from work. From where I used to work at. I tend not to friend too many people. I didn't friend anybody while I was working. I retired last year, but I just didn't want nobody to see the craziness and the crazy person that I was. So I wouldn't friend them on Facebook. But after I left and retired, there's maybe about 3 people from work that I friended. It was 2 of my bosses, which were really great Christian people that really gave me a lot of support, to learn my job and to do my job, and that I could go talk to when I had problems and things like that. And another guy that got hired on at the same time I did. And so most of the people that I'm friends with, I'm associated with you in some way or another. There's a few of you I've never met. The majority of you, I've met you one time or the other. And you're my friend on Facebook because I think that you have something to contribute to me. Now, if anybody really knows me, you know that my mind changes from one moment to another. I'm that guy you could be talking to and be in a deep discussion and see a squirrel playing up in the tree, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the squirrel and pointing it out to you. That's the type of person I am. The month of August, what is today? August the 2nd? The month of August has always been a very, very hard time for me. I'm going to let you guys know something about me that many of you people don't know. I'm the son of a Korean War veteran, and when I was 12 years old, my father passed away. But it was a violent passing away, and so it really affected my life. I was only 12 years old. My father committed suicide. There was a lot of different things going on in his mind, in his life at the time. But I'm pretty sure that my father suffered from post-traumatic stress. I really didn't get to know who my father really was. But this time of year has always been a troubling time of year. And my wife will let you know if any time that I ever had a slip up in my sobriety or done really crazy things. It's been in the month of August, and it's because it's always the anniversary of my dad's death coming up. But anyways, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about while I do this is about how I overcame that. Because when I was 12 years old and that real violent thing happened to me, it really messed up the psyche of my mind. I went, it was between the years of grade school and junior high school. I became a very, very angry young man. And so angry that the people around me didn't know what in the world I would do. I was kind of a small guy in school. I was really never bullied. There was only one person that I can remember that bullied me when I was in school, and I took care of that. In a few incidents where he learned not to bully me. And I'm not proud of the way I acted from back then. But I was very, very violent. Within, in less than a month after my father passed away, I got drunk for the first time. Me and some friends, we stole some beer out of one of our friends' refrigerator from their parents. And we went down to the river, and we were playing on this old river dredger. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and there on the Maumee River, they have these river dredgers. And we went down there and we were playing on it. We drank some beer up on the railroad tracks before we went down there. And next thing you know, someone called the cops on us, and the cops picked us all up, put us in a paddy wagon, and drove us around and scared us about what we were doing. But that was my first run-in with the law. I was 12 years old. That was when I had my first beer. But from there on out, everything sort of went downhill for a long time. Most of my adolescence and early teenage years was me trying to figure out why everything was happening to me. I got involved with a lot of people that slowly drifted me into the drug culture. I'm looking for something, I can't find it. And little by little, from the time I was 12 years old, and by the time I was 16 years old, wow, did it stop? Is it still live? Yes, it is still live. Okay, but nobody's watching. Oh well. This will be posted later, so that'll be good. Anyways, during the time I was in high school, I tried to do good. I person that was really to myself. I read a lot, and the friends that I picked were usually friends that would hit, were mainly pretty good guys, but we tended to drift off and slowly, I started hanging out with the druggies instead of the smart kids, and I was never that athletic. Went out for the wrestling team one year, and my drug use, was more important to me than wrestling. I was in I was in the Boy Scouts. I dropped out of the Boy Scouts by the time I was 14. And most of the guys I was in Boy Scouts with, a lot of them, we wind up all dropping out. And it was because we were into rock and roll and drugs. I would get in a lot of fights. The one guy that used to try to bully me a lot, his name was David. And it was really weird. He was bigger than I was. He would push me around sometimes, like on the playground during gym and things like that. I can remember one time during class time in junior high school, he pushed me and we got in a big old fight. Then later on that weekend, we were down at the schoolyard, and we used to go down to the schoolyard to play football or a game called Strikeout and things like that. Well, David came up and he pushed me then, because he wasn't satisfied that our fight was over with. And I got in a fight with him then, and my sister ran home and got my mother and came and broke up the fight and dragged me home and everything, and with me all bloody and poor David all bloody. But the thing about David, though, later on in high school, me and him became pretty good friends. I used to hang out at his house a lot and things like that. He went into the Navy, I went into the Army, and I really missed seeing. I don't really know what David's doing nowadays. He's one of the people I haven't never been able to make recontacts with. There's another friend of mine that's on Facebook here, and his name is Al. I can remember one time we were up in the cafeteria fooling around and everything, and a friend of mine had a switchblade knife and gave it to me, and I was carrying it around and acting like a fool with it all day long. And I pulled that switchblade knife out on Alan under the table and poked it at him. I didn't stab him, but anyways, and me and him wind up getting in a fight at a place we used to hang out at, the sports center and everything. And I feel totally ashamed by the way I treated Alan back then. Me and Alan, we made amends to each other a long, long time ago. But I regret the way I treated some of my friends. And anyways, Alan, I went into the Army, and Alan, he went into the Navy. Another guy went into the Navy. I don't know what these Toledo kids, think about going into the Navy. Anyways, my whole, high school years were trouble. By the time I got into my junior year, I started using LSD. I OD'd on LSD twice in my junior year of high school. My mother sent me down to stay with my grandparents in West Virginia. Well, first with my first with my grandparents, and then I had to go to court because I had possession of LSD, juvenile court, and anyways, I stayed with my grandparents. I stayed with my uncle, who's a Baptist minister, and which actually he taught me a lot. But I wind up telling the judge that, he asked me what I was going to do. I says, well, I'm going to stay off drugs and I'm going to join the Army. And so he dismissed the charges against me. It was nothing formal or anything like that. It was just me promising that I'd join the Army. I went back to West Virginia and spent a summer drinking and drugging with my cousins and their friends and everything in the little town of Marlington, West Virginia. And at the end of the summer, I joined the Army. Anyways, that's how I got into the Army, 17 years old. While my classmates were doing their senior year up in Toledo, Ohio at Wade High School, I was, they started, going to the football games and things like that, and I was in basic training at Fort Jackson. That was back in 1972, and my mother thought that would really straighten me out and get me away from drugs and things like that. But I can remember, even in basic training, and I was with a lot of older guys there because the draft was still going on at the time, and guys were, the strictness of how people could get on and off Army bases back then wasn't the same as it is nowadays. And one of the guys, I think it was his girlfriend or his brother or somebody, got him some pot there. And I can remember one day, while in basic training, we're taking the garbage out after cleaning the barracks in the morning, and we smoked a joint as we were taking the garbage out. And while I was in basic training, after we were there about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, one day after training, or it was I think it was on a Saturday. We had training in the morning. We didn't have any training that afternoon. Our drill sergeant marched us up to the top of Tank Hill. There was a PX up there where they sold beer, just so we could get supplies and things like that. But they also sold beer up there. He literally, bought us a bunch of beer, put it on the table that was on the outside, and told us, to make sure we got back, whatever the time was, 7 o'clock or something like that. And we sit up there and drank beer for the next 2 or 3 hours, I'm only 17 years old. There's no big deal about it back then. But it was apparent that the Army did not keep me from, drinking and drugging. I'm looking for something else again. I need a number 8. Oh, here we go. I had a number 8. I just had a number 8. I'm looking for a little piece. I need to put that in there. I need this. But a lot of people don't know that about me. Yeah. In the Army, after basic training, I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia. There I trained to be a radio operator, a radio relay carrier, a multi-channel communications operator, where we ran relay stations out in the field. And while I was there about 6 months or so. I believe the first night we were there, they gave us all of our blankets and stuff like that, and all of us got in our civilian clothes, and we headed to Augusta, Georgia, and started bar hopping. And so basically the whole time I was in AIT, I was drinking and drugging while I was there. During that time, I used to travel back up to West Virginia, to where my mother moved to. And I don't understand where I misplaced that wrench. But where she moved to, and I had a friend who's a draftee from Princeton, West Virginia, had this little old car, and every weekend that we had a chance, he would drive me up to my grandparents' house in southern West Virginia, and then my mother would come down and get me and take me up to Arlington, West Virginia. And I'd spend Saturday night partying in that little tiny town in the backwoods of West Virginia. And then somehow I'd make my way back down to Princeton, get with Fred, my Army buddy Fred, and we go back to Augusta, Georgia. But on one of the weekends that I went back, and I'm still, remember, I'm just 17 years old. I was, back then in Arlington, West Virginia, Saturday night the town was full of young people and old people too, up and down the streets. It was, the old time downtown small downtown area where everybody came to town on Saturday to shop, and they had a pool hall there and some bars and a couple of places to eat. And the kids, the young people would all hang out at this little place that was like a grill that didn't sell beer, but they had pool tables in there and pinball machines and stuff like that. Hang out there, a jukebox. Well, anyways, I was out in front of that place talking to my cousin, Brenda, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, and we were talking loud and everything, and I was cursing and cussing. And some guy came up to me and said that he was offended that I was cussing in front of the girls. I was talking to my cousin Brenda, and I believe my sister Rhonda too. And it was none of his business. We wind up getting in a fight. And he was a big guy compared to me. And so I whipped off my belt to defend myself. Somehow the fight got pushed into the alley. And while we were in the alley, the city police came. And at that time they had basically, I think it was 3 cops. You know, they each took an 8-hour shift. And the chief police, he was the chief of police because he was the head of the police force of the big 3-cop town. And he jumped in to break us up. And I wind up hitting him with that belt. Almost put his eye out. Well, somebody said I was on drugs. I wasn't. I had just been drinking and stuff like that. But he took me to the little hospital there to have me checked out and things like that. And while I was there, I escaped. Went back to Fort Gordon, Georgia. And then maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later, while my mother was in the hospital and I came back to visit her, my stepfather arranged to have me arrested, and I was thrown in jail for 3 days until I had to see the magistrate. I found out later that whole fight was set up by that guy because he wanted to date my mother and she refused him. And so he was attacking my mother by having someone attack me and by arresting me. I forgive that old guy. In fact, he's passed on a long time ago. And I hope he forgave me for the damage I did to his face. Anyways, caused me to be AWOL. So that's the only lost time I have in the Army is from that time I was in jail there. Went back to Fort Gordon, Georgia. I graduated from my AIT and then got assigned to the 1st Cav Division down at Fort Hood. Down at Fort Hood, the first year that I was there, I did the same thing I did every place else I've ever been. Party. I don't understand why this won't come out. Using drugs, smoking pot, learned how to ride a motorcycle, got my own motorcycle, and I was doing the same stuff I was doing all along ever since I was 12 years old, drinking and drugging, and just continuing destroying my body and my mind. But then, got put in the hospital because I came down with hepatitis. And after I got out of the hospital, I bought my first motorcycle because I was in the hospital long enough. I saved up I didn't spend my money, and I was saving up money anyways. And I had enough money, and I went down and bought me a brand new. It was last year's stock though, but it was still brand new off the floor. 1973 Suzuki TC 125. And with that bike, I continued to learn how to ride more. And had a lot of fun. Me and my Army buddy, Pat Olbrich, he had a little Yamaha 125. We used to go ride on the tank trails, and I got a picture posted. It's not very clear of us. We were down at Stillhouse Lake riding our bikes, jumping the hill. It was a lot of fun. But anyways, I sort of was staying away from drinking. I was smoking a lot of pot because of the hepatitis. They told me I shouldn't consume alcohol. It would destroy my liver if I did. But, until I recovered from that. But me and some Army buddies, I believe it was me maybe Pat, and I think my roommate Jim Shepard. We went down to Austin and we saw that movie, The Exorcist. That movie really scared the bejesus out of me. I mean, it scared me. It made me start thinking about my soul, about evil around me, and things of that sort. A little bit later on, the Army, there at Fort Hood, we had this culture day where we could go do different things, and a bunch of Christians set up a deal where a bunch of Christian singers and evangelists came and talked to us and things of that sort, and I filled out a card saying I wanted to know more about Jesus. Well, chaplain from the Church of the Nazarene, he's an Army chaplain, but he was a minister for the Church of the Nazarene, which is kind of strange because that's what my grandparents on my mother's side, they were from the Church of the Nazarene, even though I attended Baptist church as I was growing up. He came down from the motor pool and called me out. We went and took a walk and everything, and he asked me about, if I wanted to give myself to Jesus. And he sat there and prayed with me. And I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior at that time. And that was back in April 19th, 1974. And a couple weeks later, I went down to a local Baptist church and got baptized. And I had become born again. I started my initiation into God's good church. Anyways, let's see. Before I do anything else, I'm going to have to disconnect some things. I don't know if anybody's watching this. I don't think they are. I'm live, and I don't see anything going on. No comments, but I guess everybody's at work. But I'm going to continue to do this. But I believe I'm still live. But we'll see. If you see anything, make comments. Anyways, my roommate at the time, a draftee named Jimmy Shepard. He became a newborn Christian shortly before I did, I believe. Him and a guy named Stan used to come down and play their guitars, in our room and things like that. And I used to listen to them and everything, listen to their discussions. And anyways, became a newborn Christian, and got involved with Jim and Stan, and with a group of young believers, all of us, in the Army, and some of them were spouses of soldiers and family members of soldiers. Anyways, we had this little home church out in Copper's Cove, Texas. And of course, we attended regular church too, but got involved with them. There's a little place there in Killeen, Texas. It's called the Ark. Jim and Stan, they used to play there. And my buddy that I used to ride motorcycles with, that I did ride, back then, I did ride motorcycles with and do other stuff with. We both did the same job, even though he was trained in another job, but they trained him at the same job I had, so we were in the same platoon, and he became involved and gave his life to Jesus Christ. That was Pat. Pat's a really good guy. But he had a past a lot like mine. I can't say everything about that, but more or less we had a lot in common. He was from Detroit originally, and I was from Toledo. Yeah, I was right. There's dirt coming out of my fuel lines. That fuel line's got into that carburetor. But he grew up in Detroit. I grew up in Toledo. You know, our accents were similar, and a lot of our interest in music was similar and everything. But he also became, you know, a believer. Of course, I think Pat had more church upbringing than I did. So if I remember right, I think Pat was raised in the Catholic Church. So, anyways, Pat was involved, and I had another buddy of ours that came around about that same time. His name was Doug, and he's, you know, all these people I'm talking about are friends on Facebook. And Doug, you know, he had gotten in some trouble where he was stationed down in Panama before he came to Fort Hood. He had become, you know, gave himself over to Jesus and was going around carrying the Bible. Next thing you know, he got involved with us too. And we had a big group. We went to this house of a couple named Tim and Connie Baca. They very much welcomed us all. We'd go over there, have Bible studies, and the Jim and Stan, and Pat, Tim, you know, they do music and stuff, and we got involved with another guy named Alan. He was in the I believe it's 7th Cav. You know, because they shared very experience we did. And anyways, we all used to go over there and have a great old time at the Baca's house. And that was in 1974. I was a very young Christian, but my addictions weren't being dealt with. Not at all. And there's a few things that I was doing that I was still ashamed of, and I didn't want to, you know, that I thought that I needed to take care of and everything. Until I got that done, I wasn't good enough to be around these people. And I drifted back to my drug use and drinking and things like that. And then I got discharged out of the Army and went up to Toledo, Ohio. Stayed up there, and when they talk about when demons are taken out of a possessed person, they come back even stronger. I'll say one thing, that is true. I got back to Toledo, and I was drugging harder than I ever did before. I stayed up there for a few months. Then I got to yearning to be back with my Army buddies down in Texas. And they invited me to come back down there. You know, a few of them, Jim, Pat, Alan, and others. A guy named that we called Tex, and that's not his real name. He was a Puerto Rican, and he grew up. People called him Tex because he came at one time. He was stationed down. Well, he wasn't. His dad was. He was a lifer's brat, and his dad was stationed down in San Antonio. And so when he went back to New York or someplace, all of his friends called him Tex. And that's Modesta Solero. I think he's living in Ohio right now. He was up in Colorado, but for a short time he's living up in Ohio. I haven't seen him on Facebook for a while, but he was really a great guy. Anyways, we all were sharing this house together. Tex at the time was still in the Army. He was over there in the 1st Armored Division. Al was still in the Army. He was in the 1st Cav Division. Me, Jim, Stan, Pat, and others, we had been discharged. We had one friend named Jim All. Let's pray for Jim All. He's ill right now, living out in California. But Jim All and another buddy named Scott, You know, they were in that horse platoon, and they were mule skinners. Well, Scott got out of the Army and became a minister at a local church down there. And Jim, he was out of the Army, but General Shoemaker talked him into rejoining the Army, and he re-enlisted so he could be General Shoemaker's driver. And he did that for a while. I don't think Jim stayed in for 20 years or so, but I was blessed to be able to see him again back in October. Like I said, I just ramble on. I'm one of those guys that sees a squirrel and start talking about the squirrel. Ooh, it's getting hot in here. But anyways, here we go. Now I've got it down. Now I got the next step is to take off this air cleaner. And I need a number 8, I think, or is it number 10? No, number 10. Anyways, I went back and I stayed with him for a little while. You know, I rededicated my life to Jesus. You know, we went to the local Methodist church there, and I can even remember some of us going to one of these Methodist circuit rider churches to give a service. You know, it's one of the missionary churches they have out in the boonies. They still have those. Methodists still do that too. And we went there and did a service one Sunday of one of the. There's a young minister that we knew. I can't remember his name right now. Jim or Pat probably wouldn't remember if they would see this, but I doubt if they're seeing this. Anyways, we went there, and it's probably one of the first, praise type services I ever seen, because we did it. I'm not a musician, but Jim and Stan played music, and the worship was led and everything, and it was pretty neat. And at that time, all of us that were out of the Army, our hair was getting long, and a lot of those old folks there, they really liked it, and it was something else. It was something else. Anyways, I stayed with Pat. Jim wound up getting married. We went up to Dallas, where he married a young lady that had the nickname Sunshine. Her real name is Deborah, a beautiful Christian girl. And her and Jim got married and had two boys. I believe Jim's boys followed in their father's footsteps as a musician too. Anyways, but shortly after that, I drifted away again. And with one of the guys, I was working for the Army as a civilian at the time. And I started sneaking out away from the guys. I was going to the discos and the nightclubs, and I wound up becoming a roommate with one of the guys I worked with. And just drifted away from Jim, Pat, Stan, Alan, Scott, and Jim, and all the rest of them, and fell right back into my demons, drinking and drugging. I did that up until summer 1976. Then I thought maybe a change of place would help me out, so I went back to, instead of going back to Toledo this time, I went to West Virginia. And I went back to West Virginia. Couldn't find a job initially. Went and got my miner's apprenticeship card. Of course, I was still drinking and drugging and didn't have no money. And finally said, well, I need another change of place. So I joined the Army again. I re-enlisted. This is December 1976. This time around, I said I'm going to be the best soldier that I can be. But within a week and a half after getting back in, I got an Article 15 for wrongfully urinating in the hallway after going out drinking. And I thought, well, this ain't working out so hot. But that was at Fort Jackson. I was just there for a few weeks to take a basic electronics school before they sent me off to Redstone Arsenal to teach me to be a repairman, a repairer, like a Pershing electronic repairer, where I got to go to school at the prestigious Redstone Arsenal. Learn about how to work on the electronics, the guidance systems, and test equipment for the Pershing missile system. Imagine that. This kid that's been abusing drugs and alcohol since he was 12 years old, and at that time, that would make me, 24 years old. They were training me, wait a minute, I can't count, can I? Yeah, 77, 20, 23, and 22 years old, for training me to work on nuclear missiles. That showed the vetting in the Army wasn't that good. Anyways, I went to Redstone Arsenal. First night there, went to town. We went to this country and western place, saw a guy named David Allen Cole play. And, of course, went back to the barracks, was drunk and everything. But even though in the evenings and on weekends I was partying hard, I did determine that I was going to do the best I could. I studied hard, wind up being the distinguished graduate of my class, which this is a very long class, from January to November. I was on top of my class. Also, while I was at Redstone Arsenal, I really became gung-ho. I still had my old, the fatigues where we used to have starch and everything, even though by that time the Army went to permanent press, but I still had my old fatigues from the first time I was in it, and I'd wear starch fatigues, looking sharp. I became the Post Soldier of the Month while I was there. And that's despite the fact that the reason why I had to do that is because I was volunteered, because someone reported that I drove my motorcycle through the barracks. And of course it was true. I could have probably got an Article 15 if someone would have went on record saying I did it, but they didn't. But I was volunteered to do the challenge of becoming Post Soldier of the Month. And I studied hard. I did it. First I became Soldier of the Month of the company, then Soldier of the Month of the battalion, then Soldier of the Month of the school brigade, and then I was the Post Soldier of the Month. I got my picture put all over Redstone Arsenal. But at the same time, I was still a drunk. And I went off after that and got transferred to Germany. One good place to send a drunk is to send them to Germany. One good place to send a drug addict is to send them to Germany. Over in Germany, as soon as I got assigned to my unit, the first night I got drunk and I poured beer in the guy's helmet that he had. It was his hat. His hat on the floor, and said it was a 10cc joke. Whatever that meant, I have no clue. But anyways, that's how I introduced myself to all my new Army buddies over in Germany. While I was in Germany, I had saved up money before going over there, and it came that spring. I got over there, it was in December, just before Christmas. But I learned about where all the places to go to drink, all the people who had hashish, and just introduced myself to German lifestyle, Germany pretty well. And I had saved up my money while I was at Redstone Arsenal. I owned 3 motorcycles. I had a 350 Honda, had a 200 Honda, and I had this basket case, I think it was 1947 model trike Cervicar, which I never had the time and place to do it at to do the restoration on it. So I sold that to an Army buddy that lived in Georgia. I hope he finally got it on the road. And I sold. I let another friend have the 350 and another buddy have the 200. And I went off to Germany. And while I was in Germany, I was determined to get me a new motorcycle. Came that spring, I bought me a brand new XLCH. And from then on in, life just kept getting worse. I had a buddy over there. His name was Chuck. He was actually one of my supervisors. At the time, I was an E5. Because I got promoted from E4 to E5 because I was a distinguished grad at Redstone Arsenal. So I arrived in Germany as a young E5. I was 23 years old when I got over there, or shortly before. Shortly before I went in 77. Yeah, I was 22 when I got over there. When I was 23 is when I bought the Harley. And I had a buddy over there named Chuck, and he wound up getting him a Triumph. I had my Sportster, and we wound up joining a motorcycle club over there called Unforgiven Fate. You know, of course, you know, it's just a typical club, a bunch of people that love motorcycles getting together, you know, working on our bikes together, and partying together. You know, nothing crazy or anything like that. But me and Chuck, you know, we went to a lot of rallies while we were over there. We had a lot of fun. But at one of the rallies, I got involved with an outlaw group down in a rally near Augsburg, and the president of that group introduced, you know, said that he could get me some hashish. And I said, yeah, how much can you get me? You know, because I was thinking just getting enough for personal use. Well, I can get it by the kilograms. By the kilograms. I had another friend over there. I'm not going to mention his name, but he had been the distributor for hashish at our barracks and at a barracks in New Ulm. And he got transferred back to the States. And there was a vacuum there. And the guy that he was selling at this other Army base, this hashish to, was also one of my Army buddies. And I told him that I had a source for hashish, and he told me how much he'd give me, and I remember what that guy from that outlaw motorcycle club said he'd sell it to me for. And so I made arrangements to pick up kilos of hashish and to sell, you know, from the guy that I knew in one place to give it to the guy that I knew in another. And we did that a couple times, you know, a couple kilos at a time. And then one night when I was supposed to go pick up some stuff for him, my Army buddy came up from where he was stationed at and to bring me the money that I needed to go buy what he wanted, and which I was going the following day. And there was a beer fest going on. We went to the beer fest, and I wound up, you know, coming back from the beer fest. I was drunk. I had an old, I think it was an old Fiat, it might have been a Renault. For some reason I keep thinking it was a Fiat, but the more I think about it, it was probably a Renault. But anyways, we were driving back, and the MPs pulled us over. We're out in the economy, we're not. But we had a young German girl with us. And actually, I think that young German girl turned us in, saying that we had a lot of hashish. Of course, at the time, we just had just a little bit. But I wound up getting in a fight with the MPs. I was drunk. They got me for DUI, drunken disorderly conduct, unbecoming non-commissioned officer. possession of hashish, among other things. And they took me down to the MP station. One of my sergeants from my section had to come down and pick me up. And that was all well and done. The next night, I called the guy I was supposed to get the hashish from and told him I couldn't come because I had gotten arrested the night before. And that night, me and my buddy, we still had some hashish. They didn't know it, a little bit. But we went out and we went to a private party, and I was drinking and everything, and he wasn't. So I let him drive my car back to the barracks so I wouldn't get another DUI. But the Army has a funny thing. You're supposed to have this thing called a POV license. Anyways, my Army buddy didn't have a POV license. It's a privately owned vehicle. It has permission for you as a soldier to drive over in Germany. Even if you got a regular driver's license, if you don't have that POV license, you're not supposed to be driving. But anyways, they arrested me again for allowing an unauthorized person to drive my car, for drunken disorderly conduct, for disobeying a lawful order, and for assault and battery against a military policeman. Those 2 nights is what killed my Army career. I wound up getting a field grade Article 15. I lost my sergeant's stripes. I went to Germany as an E5 and left Germany as an E4. Of course, they had me in rehab, and I wasn't dealing with rehab too well, so I requested to be discharged. And they put me out under a general discharge. And good thing it was good paper, not bad paper. But I had a merciful battalion commander, and God bless him, because he could totally ruin my chances to get recovery by not having access to the VA and other sources in education too. He could barely made it other than honorable, but he put me out under honorable conditions, which kept me having all my veterans benefits. And God bless him. When he interviewed me, he said, "I'm firing you, and I want to know what you're going to do when you get out." And I told him I was going to try to get rehabilitated. I was going to go into a recovery program and go to college. Well, I left Germany in 1980. I still wasn't cleaned up. I went back to college. First, I went to school to become a disc jockey. And I met some pretty good people there. A couple of my best friends from that time are Facebook friends too, Michael and Kelly. But I still drank, I still smoked pot. Wasn't doing so good. I wind up getting an associate degree in broadcasting. I worked at a radio station, 2 different radio stations for a couple of years period. Then I OD'd on drugs in '83 and was put in a coma. I woke up in the VA hospital and really needing Jesus. Well, I rededicated my life again to Jesus. And joined a little local church there, and that was in Beaver, West Virginia. And I was seeing a counselor. I was trying to take my rehab seriously. And let's see, I got that disconnected. And I was going to the VA, I was in counseling, working on my issues and things like that. And even signed up and went to a Bible college thinking that I might go into the ministry somehow. it only lasted a semester there because, mentally I just couldn't handle everything yet. We didn't have, I refused to go to 12-step programs back then. And anyways, because of the stress of the studying and still, going through the withdrawal of not using drugs and things like that, I wound up, dropping out of the Bible school. And then I struggled for a few months there, and then wind up going to Marshall University, where I met my wife. I was clean and sober when I met her, and but by that time, something happened at the church I was going to, and I really got upset with organized religion altogether then. So I thought it could be just me and Jesus, and I started putting my efforts, to stay sober, you got to do some type of service of some sort. So I started putting all my efforts into political things, thinking that would take care of the service thing instead of religious things. But I did it under the idea, more or less like the social gospel, and I got to figure out what I got to do here next. The social gospel, and everything would be okay. I'd stay sober, and everything would be good. Well, I need to take that off. Now I became involved with more or less a socialist group, even though I still claimed to be a Christian, and I was doing it in my idea under Christian principles. This is how these liberal Christians get sucked up into support the wrong type of people, I'll tell you that. Anyways, I got involved with them, it's a peace group and social justice group, and I was even president of it for a couple of years. But it kept me sober, after a couple years after I met my wife, we got married, and we were doing pretty good. When I met her, I had a little street and trail bike. She bought her own helmet to ride with me, and then I went off. Well, I got to disconnect now. Then I had to loosen that up, but I can't see it. That's weird. Oh, that's that. Okay. Anyways, everything seemed to be going pretty good. And I stayed sober. I wound up getting my 4-year degree. I studied journalism. I did some freelance journalism and things of that sort, and political science. And wind up getting a job with a nonprofit. And then my wife, she came down to Arkansas to try to get training to be a medical transcriptionist. And that means she had to leave me alone by myself while she was in training down in back in West Virginia while she was down here in Arkansas. And I did pretty good at first. I started hanging out with a lot of the people I knew from college and some of the younger college kids and things like that. And, to occupy my time. And then one night while I was at a bar, hanging out with some of these college kids, and young lady, a friend of ours, and she handed, I asked her, it was really hot. We were in this crazy nightclub. It was really hot, and I go, what do you, I was getting ready to go downstairs to get me a soda. I said, what are you drinking? She says, iced tea. I go, iced tea? Can I have a sip of it? And I chugged a big drop of it, and she goes, that's got alcohol in it. And I go, what? She goes, yeah, I think she called it a New Jersey iced tea. And from that time on, Next thing you know, I started thinking, well, I can smoke pot, I can, be okay, I can drink a beer every once in a while, and I can be okay. And then I had a relapse, and no support system around me at all. Well, my wife, she was back here, down here in Little Rock. I was back there in Huntington, and I had relapsed, and I wound up quitting my job because it became too stressful. And it's because I was relapsed, and people noticed that I was relapsed. And I don't remember how to take this off here. And this is terrible. I need to take this off. Anyways, I relapsed. We wind up moving to Arkansas because my wife got a job down here. I lost my job there in West Virginia anyways, and I tell people that I gave up my job so my wife could take her job, but the truth of it is I left my job because I had relapsed and I was doing a terrible, terrible job at my job. We came down here to Arkansas. At the time I had my old 650 Yamaha that I bought for my birthday back in '87. That's the only thing we had for transportation. She took the bus to work, and I stayed at, took a couple jobs I didn't really like. I was getting unemployment from my other job, and I wound up doing a couple jobs I didn't really like, and then our oldest son came along, so I used that as an excuse not to work. I became a stay-at-home dad, which actually, because he came along, I sobered up, for the most part. But every once in a while, on a weekend, I'd go hang out at the local motorcycle bar and get drunk and make a fool of myself. But my son coming along made me think differently about what I needed to be as a father and such. And then our second son came along. I finally gave in and said we needed a car. I sold my motorcycles to buy us a car, and so I went out without a motorcycle for a couple of years, and I sobered up even that much more. I still wasn't going to church. I still believed in God, I still believed in Jesus, and of course I was believing that once you're saved, you're always saved. You just need to try to do the best you can. But in reality, I was really screwing up. And I got to remember how to take this off. And I think I have to take that out. Well, I'm going to take a break from this in here in a minute, but I'm going to finish my story. Anyways, as my son started getting older, I started doing things like, as they got in school, I volunteered to be a scout leader. I was staying sober for the most part. And by being a scout leader, all of a sudden I was around other men. A lot of them were Christian men, not all of them. But, my son's scout units, their Cub Scout pack was sponsored by, Our Lady of Good Counsel. Then later on, when that scout troop sort of collapsed, and when the school closed, moved the kids over to Holy Souls. I had them involved with this scout pack over there, and of course there was a Methodist church sponsored the troop they were in. But it put me around, and I was volunteering, doing service, so that really helped me keep sober for the most part. But in 2004, 2005, the winter of 2004 or 2005, I had gotten back into the habit of drinking in the evenings to help me sleep and stuff. And the job that I had was really stressful and everything. So I thought it would be okay. I could drink and I'd be all right and everything. And it finally came to a head. I was in contact with my Army buddy, Pat, and he told me about a program that his church had. He went to Saddleback Church out in California, and it was called Celebrate Recovery. And in 2005, May of 2005, and on, I believe it was May 5th, I walked through the doors at a local church here, Fellowship Bible Church, and started on a 12-step program and started rediscovering, what God wanted for me and get myself sober. And ever since then, here it is, more than 13 years later, I'm still clean and sober. Since that time, the year after I started going to Celebrate Recovery, I came into the Catholic Church, and I served in the Catholic Church. I worked at the Catholic school that my sons went to, and it closed, and I worked for the church, church office, and as education coordinator for religious education. And then from there, I went to go work at a homeless shelter. But my life is servicing God and service. Lately, after I worked in a homeless shelter, I went to work at the VA, so I could serve my fellow veterans, which was really, really great for me. I retired last year. I've been clean and sober for over 13 years. I'm in a motorcycle ministry called the Catholic Cross Bearers Motorcycle Ministry. This is the way I'm trying to serve right now. It's been a little dry. I've been a little dry over the last year or so, but things are looking up. Anyways, I'm clean and sober, but if you knew me 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you probably are wondering how in the world that I survived all these years. And the only way that I did is by the grace of God. And I truly believe it was from 2 different days that, certain events. The first event is when I decide that I give my life to Jesus Christ, that I turn it over to Him, into His control. And a lot of people don't take much heed to that, because a lot of people do that and a lot of people fall away, or they think they fall away. And the second thing was that I got baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And a lot of people think baptism is just an outer sign that you committed yourself to Christ. But, within our church, there's something that's given to you. A mark is put onto your soul, onto your heart. And you have, at that time of the baptism, your original sin is washed away. You have become part of the church. And this thing about once saved, always saved, I don't really buy into that. I believe you can throw away your salvation. You can accept Jesus Christ. You can be baptized, but you can throw away your salvation. But God gives us the grace to where we can grow more holy. He wants us to be holy. He wants us to grow to be holy. And I can see different things in my life where God was there. He was there the day that my battalion commander, who was a devout Christian, showed me mercy. He might not have recognized it himself at that time, but God was with him, because he was a devout Christian. He was a devout Catholic. And so when he made his decision, it was written on his heart to do what God wanted him to do. So he, instead of punishing me in such a way that probably would have totally ruined my life for the rest of my life, he gave me a punishment in which I could recover from. And so I see God's hand in my life there. God was in my life when he put me with my Army buddies back in Texas. God was in my life when I met my wife. When I went to Marshall University, my wife, she has always been a very devout woman. Only time that she has missed going to church on Sunday is because of my fault, or she's been ill. not because of any choice that she made to miss it. It's because she either has been ill or not. And she's always, everybody's life is up and down. Every Christian life is. But she's always been a prayerful person. She's always asked God for, to help her, not just herself, but her family, her husband, and whatnot. She prayed for me and prayed for me when I fell and got away from being clean and sober. And then there was members of my wife's church that used to minister to us in ways that a lot of people don't understand. Like, my wife is visually impaired. She couldn't drive herself to church. But members of the church would come and pick my wife up to take her to Mass. And those people always showed me, gave me respect, never actually preached to me, but they just showed me how faithful they were in serving God by serving my wife and serving my family. And certain people gave us certain helps during certain times. We struggled back in those days. And then God gave me a big sign when he put Pat back into my life. Now, Pat, me and him both were drug addicts and drug users before we decided to give our lives, to Christ, to have a personal relationship. And out of the blue, through the internet, somehow me and Pat connected back together when I hadn't talked to him since 1976 to 2000. It was 3 or 2004 when we first started communicating. And he, God used him to put me into a recovery program to where I was drifting back into the real bad things that I could wind up losing my whole family if I didn't get myself straight. Of course, that year that I went into recovery, I lost a lot of possessions. I lost my truck that was, that I bought brand new. I lost my motorcycle that was brand new and things of that sort. And it took a couple of years back for me to recover from those type of losses. But even, God is there through the recovery program. A lot of people think once you turn yourself over to God, that everything's going to be okay without any efforts from us. Well, God, he gives us the grace to do what is right, but we have to choose to do what's right. It's like in 12-step programs, there's a saying, it works if you work it. And that's the same in everything that you do. If you don't do what, if you don't have a prayerful life, if you don't, wake up in the morning and, praise God, if you don't confess the bad things that you've done to another person, if you don't continuously do an inventory, if you don't serve other people, if you don't give the message of God out to other people, then you're going to drift back into what you were. And so this whole thing today, I took off my carburetor. I got to do more, but I want to concentrate it. But I want to give this message over today, that if you do not know who Jesus Christ is, say the sinner's prayer and say, Lord, I want to know what you're all about. I need help. I want to do better. I want to do better for my family. I want to do better for myself. I want to do better for my children. I want to treat my wife better. And take that first step of asking God to come into your life. There's, that's just the first step. It's knowing that you need something. That you need something else, a higher power than you. And that higher power is Jesus Christ. Anyways, that's what I'm going to end this with. I love everybody out there. Pray for all the motorcyclists out on the road. We've got some brothers and sisters that are heading up to Cleveland to the Catholic Cross Bearers National Meeting. I wish I could be up there. Hugs and kisses to all you up there. There's a lot of motorcyclists that are heading up to Sturgis to the annual rally. There's a lot of Christians going up there to be witnesses to a lot of the motorcyclists too. I know members of Broken Chains are going to be up there ministering. CMA, the Christian Motorcycle Association, will be up there ministering. I believe we have at least one Catholic Cross Spirit is going to be up there. It's already up there. And, you know, all the different Christian motorcycle groups are going to be up there among, you know, a lot of lost people. So pray for our brothers and sisters that are out on the road, and our brothers and sisters as bikers and Christians and non-Christians alike. You know, pray for all of them that they have, you know, that they have safe journeys up there and back, and pray for the witnesses that the Christians are going to be up there among the big group of motorcyclists. And pray that I get to go up there someday. It's on the bucket list, okay? Anyways, everybody have a blessed day. This is Vinny. The hippie biker Jesus freak, saying I love you all. Pray for me, and I'll be praying for you. Bye-bye.